Kandic Torres. I'm the author of The Girls in Queens, my debut novel. The Girls in Queens is a novel about the fierce loyalty and friendship between two young girls named Prisma and Kelly, who are best friends and Mets fans, and that's important. And their friendship is challenged when one of their ex-boyfriends, Brian, is accused of sexual assault. At first, the girls rush to his defense, and Kelly remains staunchly by his side, while Prisma begins to have second thoughts about her own relationships to men in general and to Brian in specific. And both of the girls are forced to determine not only what justice means to each of them, but who deserves it. So I'm very excited to be here at Shorturl Museum to talk about this book with you. So I like to say that I am every character in the book. You know, regardless if they're a horrible person or someone that you love, I think authors create characters and put a little bit of themselves in each one of them. So that being said, I certainly did pull from my experience growing up in Queens. I wanted to capture that immigrant rich community and what it's like to grow up a first and second generation immigrant kid who feels caught between, smothered by, or excluded from their family's cultures of origin, and how they form friendships here in Queens and New York City, in urban areas where that community of friends becomes their family in some way, and that's what holds space for you. It is, in a way, a love letter to Queens and to a New York that doesn't often get much of the limelight. The 2006 Los Mets team, which were heavily Latinx and run by a Black Latinx general manager for the first time. I wanted to capture the excitement of seeing yourself represented on your hometown team for the first time. You know that the Mets don't usually win anything, right? So they did get to the World Series in 2015, and that's where I had the very first germ of the idea for this book, or really to set a story in 2006, because that was the last time that they had made a dent in the playoffs. And so I knew I would set a story around that. I was a short story writer at the time, and it was shortly after that, 2015 to 2016, where the Brock Turner case was getting a lot of attention in the media. And if you don't remember, Brock Turner was an elite athlete at Stanford who assaulted a woman, and who went on to write a beautiful memoir, Chanel Miller. But I became pretty wrapped by that case, and it was in seeing the women that would come forward and his family, but the women that would come forward to defend him, that made me refine my focus about women, and women specifically who have experienced sexual assault, who still go on to defend other men in their lives that are accused of violence or similar violence. So I wanted to explore that in fiction, and I realized that I would have that I could marry those two ideas, the desire to write a story set around the 2006 Mets and sports and athletes, with this idea of what it is that happens in a young girl's life that turns her into the adult that she's going to be. How does the pain that we are taught to swallow and ignore and keep it moving, how does that calcify into like an internalized misogyny that we are maybe even unaware that we're perpetuating? No, I did not write it with that intention. I'd love for it to become a film, probably. I do think that this is a story that has an ending. People have asked me if there would be a sequel or about a TV series, and I'm certainly open to anybody that wants to talk. But sure, I could see it becoming a film. It's not something that I had necessarily in mind. I am not a screenwriter. I don't have that skill like Prisma does. I have a funny answer first, okay? In first grade, I don't know if this was just a writing exercise where we had to write sentences out, okay? So I wrote, "The snow is lumpy," okay? But as I don't know how old you are in first grade, 6 or 7-year-old, my P was all messed up. So my first grade teacher, read it as lammy. "The snow is lammy," and she was like, "Oh, the moon," like, "Oh, wow, what a poet you are." And I was like, yeah, yeah, okay. So that was the first time I realized that you could you could use a word in a fun new way, and it was a mistake. It was a case of mistaken identity. I have always been interested in writing and storytelling. I wrote in the book a lot about the New York Poets Cafe and discovering the New York poets. Period. Their literature was a big moment for me to understand that there were artists writing about life, contemporary life in New York as Puerto Ricans. Like this very specific experience that changed my my point of view on what I was capable of or who I could connect with. That was the first door to community, like a literary community to me. Though I did not step foot in the New York Poets Cafe until much later, until I was an adult. So I'm going to read just a brief excerpt from 1996. The novel is told in alternating timelines between 1996, 2000, and 2006. What you need to know is that Kelly and Brisma are in the Morales' basement, Kelly's basement, and they're cleaning out the clutter in the basement for the reward of Mets tickets from her older brother. And also what you should know is that an 18-year-old boarder in the house named Timothy has recently has moved out. And he was inappropriate with girls. "Here," she said, handing me a corner of a thick blue plastic tarp. "Help me with this." I grabbed the material and pulled, but only managed to yank it out about a foot or two from behind a tattered old recliner. "Wait a second," I said, noticing the faded gray dolphins printed on it. "I know what this is." Kelly smiled. "You remember," she said, fingering the silver duct tape that ran along a ripped wave in the painted ocean scenes. "This pool has seen better days. When we were little, after Ricky Lake and Jenny Jones had aired on Channel 9 and Frances had passed out on her bed upstairs, we would spend the rest of a hot summer afternoon playing Baywatch in that inflatable kiddie pool in her backyard. We'd take turns rescuing each other from drowning, wrapping one of our arms around the other person's torso and lifting them out of the water, sneaking in mouth-to-mouth resuscitation until Frances woke up and yelled at us from that second-floor balcony, 'Stop that!' 2 words like flat slaps clapping down, sending us sloshing to the sides of the pool in shame. I remember," I said quietly. I remembered her bird-like shoulders bouncing against the rim of the pool as I performed fake chest compressions. I remembered the dank suction of her bathing suit against the hollow of my chest as her body lay on top of mine. I remembered pinching her nose closed and how her cold lips felt as I just barely parted them with my own, gently, and the laughter that followed when I blew a lungful of air into her mouth. I don't remember how long it was after Timothy arrived that we stopped playing Baywatch. I don't remember when the feelings of shame began to lift from my memory, or if they ever did. If they didn't evaporate, but rather enrich the soil from which I continued to grow. "It's trash now," she said, wrapping the tough plastic under her elbows and yanking hard. She ripped the pool loose from an exposed nail in the wall it was snagged on, but shrieked as she cut her hand on it and tripped backward. "Look," she said, holding up her hand, blood trickling down her palm. "Wash it off." I walked to the functioning sink and turned on the faucet full force. "You could get tetanus or something." Kelly held her bleeding hand as she ran over to the sink and sucked her teeth at me. "What the hell you know about tetanus?" I shrugged, watching the blood run pink off of her hand. "Do you ever wonder what life would be like without boys?" she asked, still facing the wall. "Without men at all?" "No," I laughed, grabbing a clean rag. "I mean, sure, they're disgusting and terrible, but who else would we obsess over?" "Imagine if Queens was just filled with girls," she continued. "Wouldn't it be so much more peaceful?" "A Queens filled with queens," I smirked. "Yes," she splashed water as she turned to me. "Yes, you're right. fuck that. I don't want to be a girl. Definitely not a princess. I want to be a queen. But if we're all queens, doesn't that negate the purpose? Negate the what? She shook her head. You're thinking too much. Of course we can all be queens. Each of us rulers of our own world. Kelly held her wounded palm up close to her face, studying where the nail had ripped a shallow oval crater in her skin. Hey, you okay? It's like I'm Jesus, she said with a playful smile, extending both arms out at her sides. We laughed, but as I watched a drop of blood blot the cement floor red, I had an idea. Hold on, I said. I opened a few drawers of a painted dresser by the stairs, searching for Frances's old tattoo supplies. She had designed tattoos for a few people on the block, but she also got into the idea of doing her own tattoos at home for a while. I grabbed one of the packaged needles I was looking for and held it up to Kelly in triumph. I've always wanted to do this. I ripped open the package. A tattoo? No, I said, steadying the metal against my finger. It's just the needle, no ink. I pierced it under my skin, a shallow puncture, but enough for a single bead of blood to surface on the tip of my finger. See? I grabbed her stigmata in hand and wrapped my finger inside her palm. Her lips tightened into an O, as if in pain, but no sound followed her sharp intake of breath. We're blood sisters, I said. Kelly slowly smiled, her slight underbite teasing me, ready to call me corny, but she didn't. She blinked and repeated back to me, blood sisters. I released her. You'll never be rid of me now. I expected her to laugh again, to call me out on some more boo-ha stuff, but instead her smile wore off. I'd never want to be, she said sincerely, before bending down to finish washing the gash in the oversized sink. I saw her glance over at the pile of junk we'd only made a dent in. You're the best thing I have, she said, turning off the water and grabbing the clean rag I had thrown over my shoulder. I didn't know how to respond beyond the wounded kitten sound I found myself making and instantly regretting. I felt the weight not only of the clutter in the basement closing in on us then, but of the soil behind the walls, the storied landfill of Queens Boulevard her family told us about, dumped on that road to make us a thoroughfare. How many generations would it take before the pile of everyone else's shit we'd let grow unabated swallowed us whole? Would we ever be able to dig ourselves out from underneath it all and find ourselves not girls anymore, but queens in our own right? Kelly sniffed and wrapped her hand once, twice with the cloth, then tucked it in tight. All right, she said, we've got work to do.